A few weeks ago, I made a video about how to soundproof a room for around $100, but let's face it, having $100 worth of material might not be enough to actually be able to drown out the amount of noise that will make you not go insane. This video, let's raise our budget up a bit. Few $100s, maybe even a couple of $1,000s, but when you hear about soundproofing, you usually hear it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars if you actually want to achieve the level of soundproofing where you cannot hear the noise anymore. But you can achieve that level of soundproofing even without spending tens of thousands of dollars, because in this video I'll show you ways that are affordable, that a lot of them you can still do DIY, but I'll give you a cost breakdown for each of these methods to give you an idea of how much it would cost if you would just do it yourself versus if you would hire somebody to do it for you. But first, one thing to know is what kind of noise are you wanting to soundproof? Are you wanting to soundproof voices, music without too much bass? That's what you would call airborne noise. Or do you want to soundproof for more structural noise where people are walking, footstep noise, or traffic where it's actually causing a vibration, or bass where again it's causing a vibration? Because these two types of noise will require different types of soundproofing, but the first one on this list can take care of both. Building a double wall. Now you might be wondering, what is a double wall? Well, if your room is big enough and you can spare 5 to 8 inches of room from that wall, and you don't really want to destroy the drywall that you already have, well, you might not have to. You can just build another wall in front of that. And basically how it achieves by reducing both types of noise is by creating that air gap. What you have is a second complete wall, leaving around 2 to 3 inches gap between the old wall and the new wall. You don't remove the drywall of the old wall unless you want to and you want to add additional insulation, but it's really not necessary to demolish that first wall. Just leave 2-3 inch gaps and use 2x4s or 2x6 wooden studs to build a second frame. Ensure that the new wall frame is level and securely anchored to the floor and ceiling, but not physically attached to the original wall. And also, some people might tell you to add insulation in between the old wall and the new wall. Don't do that. Add the insulation inside the studs of the second wall. Don't add it in between the two walls, because then you're just attaching the walls back together. You want to leave that air gap, because it's that air gap that is drowning out that structural noise. But before adding that insulation, here's a couple of things that a lot of people don't really talk about and that can stop a few more decibels from coming from room to room. Because if everything that you do in terms of soundproofing this wall is just to reduce 1, 2, 3 decibels each things, then it starts to matter, because if you get to 10 decibels, just 10 decibels, it's basically the equivalent of cutting the noise in half by what a human ear can hear. And all those decibels counts. One that really counts right behind me, as you can see, that big red glob. What I did here is I added a putty pad on the electrical box of an electrical outlet and also the light switches. There's a lot of holes in those electrical boxes and you want to seal those holes because sound will travel through those holes, and by having the wall open, you can use a putty pad to block some of those holes and some of that noise to come through. So the wall itself is what is going to block the airborne noise, people yelling outside. The wall is going to aid in blocking that. The air gap in between the two walls, that is what is going to basically stop the vibration from going from one wall to the other wall. The vibrations are going to be snuffed out if the vibrations are relatively small, of course, and you're not going to feel them or hear them in your room if you have a second wall. Make sure when you're ready to add the drywall onto the second wall frame to add 5/8 of an inch drywall. It's thicker than your typical 1/2 inch drywall that you probably already have on that first wall. and it will just drown out more noise without costing you that much more money. Now, depending on the type of material, where you live, and if you are hiring somebody to do this and how much the labor would cost, this type of project for a 10 by 10 room would be around $1,000 to $1,500. Now, these next methods are if you want to add on to that double wall, or if you want to scrap that idea altogether. What you can do is add a second layer of 5/8 of an inch drywall, but before doing that, you want to add a layer of mass-loaded vinyl in between the two layers of drywall. Mass-loaded vinyl, it's a dense, flexible sheet that blocks airborne noise by adding mass to the wall. Basically what this does, it increases the wall density by not adding that much thickness. So you'd have between 1 to 2 pounds of mass per square foot of this sheet of rubber-like material that comes in a roll, and you add it in between the two layers of drywall, and that will help block and absorb some sound waves coming through. It will add to your budget, but adding some mass-loaded vinyl and a second sheet of 5/8 of an inch drywall onto that first or second wall will see a considerable difference. After the second layer of drywall is installed, add some acoustical sealant around the electrical box where the box meets the drywall to seal that gap. But this will only block airborne noise. But if you still want to get rid of those vibrational noise, structural noise, and you don't really have the funds or the space to build a second wall in your room, or well, if you want to get rid of footstep noise, it's kind of hard to do that onto the ceiling, especially when the vibrations are coming down. One thing that you can do that works the same way as a double wall is something called a resilient channel. Resilient channel acts the same way, but you'll lose a lot less space and it'll cost you a lot less money, because if you can do this yourself, you'll be saving a lot of labor cost. But if you do this yourself, you have to make sure that you do it correctly. What this does, you attach it directly onto the studs, and then you attach your drywall, your ceiling, onto the resilient channel. So your ceiling is essentially floating. It's not onto the studs. So the footsteps that'll be going on top of you, those vibrations are going to go down through the studs, and they're going to be dissipated within that resilient channel, and it will not go down into the room below. So that is basically the only way to get rid of those footstep noise, because just by adding another layer of drywall and some mass-loaded vinyl onto the ceiling, what that will do, it will muffle perhaps a little bit of those footstep noise, and it will block a lot of those airborne noise, people talking, but it won't do much for heavy footstep noise. You'll still hear them, it'll just muffle them a little bit, but you won't be very satisfied if what you want to soundproof are those footstep noise. So these methods, yes, they will cost you more than $100, but it will cost you a lot less than $10,000 to be able to achieve the level of soundproofing that you actually want to achieve. But if you're not looking to really soundproof a wall and you're looking to soundproof a door for around $20, and I'm telling you, it actually works because I did a sound test in this video. So if you just go watch that, you'll be quite impressed. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, assuming you subscribed.